Hello and welcome to Hardtalk India. As the Indian economy continues to liberalize and globalize, my guest today has to often face a barrage of questions, even accusations. For instance, as the Patents Bill threatens the price of medicine, has India fulfilled its WTO obligations at the cost of the health of its people? And as the government toys with the idea of permitting foreign investment in retail trade, is it doing so at the cost of tens of millions of jobs? Those are two of the questions that I shall put today to India's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Kamal Nath. Minister, let's start with the new patents bill that you passed last month. You face, as I said, a chorus of criticism that the price of medicines could go up, perhaps even sharply. Are you guilty of fulfilling India's WTO commitments at the cost of the health, perhaps even the lives of its own people?
Well, I think it's completely misunderstood. We had to, on one side, fulfill our international obligations. We had to have credible legislation. At the same time, the challenge was, how do you secure India's pharmaceutical industry, which is on the growth? We must understand that India is one of the largest pharmaceutical industries in the world, who themselves are looking for patents. It's not the multinationals alone. India's intellectual abilities, India's abilities in research. So prices going up, I think, is an absolute bogey.
Well,
in any case,
you say it's a bogey. Let me quote to you what A.B. Bardhan, General Secretary of the Communist Party of India and one of your closest allies, has said. Patents will ensure that often a patient is left to die because he cannot afford medicines to cure him.
Mr. Bardhan's party voted for the patents bill. They supported us in the patents bill. They got up and spoke for the patents bill. And I think Mr. Bardhan has been fed on wrong facts, because there isn't going to be a patent for the next couple of years.
All right, let's then look at the facts. There are two reasons why people say the price of medicines will rise. Firstly, when medicines that have been produced after 1995 get patents, then generic versions of those medicines will have to start paying royalty, and that will mean an automatic increase in price. And because your bill does not cap royalties, the increase theoretically could be substantial.
There are 185 new drugs introduced in India after 1995. 194 new drugs. 188 of these are pre-1995
But
models.
there are 7,000 applications for pharmaceutical concerns in the mailbox.
We must also recognize that there are a handful of them who only asked for scrutiny. They were filed. And as I said, only 188 do not come into
So
patent.
do you accept that those 188, when they receive patents, then the generic versions of those drugs will go up in price to the extent to which royalty is payable?
Those 188 cannot qualify for patents because they are pre-1995 molecules.
But the
left us 6 or 7. In 6 or 7, how many will qualify? And that too, after several years.
See,
so how will prices rise?
The figure you quote is 6 or 7. The Indian Drugs Manufacturers Association says that there are 7,000 applications for pharmaceutical products in the mailbox, many of which in fact are drugs, many of which, when patents are granted, will go up. It's a simple question of your version against theirs.
No, it's not a question of version versus version. I must tell you that the IDMA has congratulated me, thanked me, for a bill which makes it credible internationally and yet takes care
It's
of
not
India's
what they're
concern.
saying in public to other people.
They've said so. This was a press statement they made. A press statement which they released, a copy of which they sent with a covering letter to me.
Let me quote to you what Yusuf Hamid, the chairman of Cipla, one of India's largest pharmaceutical companies, has said. He says that your bill is tantamount to genocide.
Well, I think it's absolutely false. What do the others say? This is one single person.
I'll
who
quote
said,
another person. Abani Roy,
who's
of
he?
the Revolutionary Socialist Party. I'm surprised you say who's he. He's one of your supporting
I know,
parties.
but I thought you were saying he's pharmaceutical manufacturers. I thought you.
Abani Roy agreed with Yusuf Hamid.
and voted for us in Parliament. The RSP spoke for
But
this
the
bill.
left now have second thoughts, and they're publicly expressing them.
I don't think they have second thoughts. They were with me in Parliament this morning, and they were saying that the amendments you brought in were very good. They spoke for the bill, and they were for the bill. That's how the bill went through.
Let's come back to the facts. You dispute that there will be an appreciable rise on the price of medicines because of royalty. The IDMA says something different. Let's leave that aside. There's a second reason why the price of medicines will go up. When medicines become obsolete and new ones take their place, those will be under patent, and Indians will have to pay whatever the foreign patent holder wants.
Well, there are provisions in the patent bill that when it's against public policy, the price is prohibitive, you can go in for compulsory licensing. There are so many comfort levels. In fact, I'm being charged the other way around.
You call them...
I'm being charged the other way around that I have made it so tight.
No, Minister, you talk about comfort levels. You're referring, in fact, to the provision for compulsory licensing on the grounds of reasonable affordability. But first of all, you can't use it for 3 years. Secondly, the patent holder has a right to oppose, and he can drag the process on for endless years thereafter. So it's a pretty ineffective bite.
You get a patent you don't get by wishing it. There is a pre-grant opposition, there's a post-grant opposition. A patent just doesn't happen because you want it. There is a process. And if you think that the process is going to be infructuous, or the process is just going to be a motion to be gone through, I must say you're very wrong.
Let me put to you the case of India's HIV/AIDS patients. As you know, India has the world's second biggest but the fastest growing population of HIV/AIDS. Today, they have access to cheap antiretrovirals because Indian companies can make genetic versions of them. Under your bill, that will stop. And when new improved antiretrovirals come on the market, these people will have to pay whatever the patent holder wants or do without it.
Out of all the antiretrovirals, there's only one antiretroviral which can possibly come under patents. That's the position today. And why do we not think...
But I'm talking about new medicine when it comes on the market.
I am talking about protecting Indian industry, that it is Indian industry's research which we must allow patents for. Why must we be under the mindset that only the multinationals who have the abilities to produce pharmaceuticals? Today, the biggest players in the Indian pharmaceutical industry, their research, their outlays on research.
But that's what you've done. You've protected the right of Indian pharmaceutical companies who are in a position to have drugs that they can patent at the cost of the hundreds of millions who need medicines and will now have to pay more for them.
Not at all. Why should we assume that patents will lead to price rise? In fact,
for the reasons I've just pointed out.
Because if there is a patent with a royalty of a few percent or 4 or 5%, it also, the large market which India offers, gives them the economics to give us cheaper medicines, which smaller countries cannot. So,
Minister, of the 100% patents in the world, and that includes medicine patents, 99.4 are in the hands of Western owners.
That's the story of the past.
The rest are spread through the whole of Africa and Asia, with India being a very small proportion. Why do you believe that suddenly with your bill, Indians will become major patent holders?
I don't believe it's because my bill. I believe my bill is because of them. That's the story of the past, and I don't want to live in the past. The past is something to reflect upon. The future is something which we got to model upon.
So in the hope that the future will be better, you are gambling with the health of those who live in the present.
I'm not gambling. I know what's happening. I know what's happening today in the pharmaceutical industry. Today, we have fulfilled our obligations. Today, we have given Indian pharmaceutical manufacturers who were doing only reverse engineering. We must remember, are we going to subscribe to a regime where you can just copy medicines?
Except that that reverse engineering, no, I'm not, but you're forgetting the fact that that reverse engineering, which produces cheap generic medicine, kept hundreds of millions of Indians able to buy medicines. It kept hundreds of millions of people outside India able to buy medicines.
This will also give Indians access to better medicines and cheaper medicines because of the volume India offers.
Let me put this to you. Your allies on the left, and I quoted Mr. Bardhan, I quoted Mr. Abani Roy, are demanding 3 types of amendments. First of all, they say they want a cap on royalties. Your bill says that royalties will be payable in terms of reasonable rates. They want it to be capped at 4% or even less. Can you agree to that?
Those are commercial arrangements. It was discussed before the bill, and it's a story of the past.
So
the bill is passed.
So you're not prepared to consider this?
This was discussed before we went to Parliament. And I said these are commercial arrangements between 2 companies. These are commercial interests which government should not intervene.
Except that
governments will intervene.
Canada has capped royalties at 4%. Why couldn't you have taken a leaf out of their book?
I think government should not intervene in commercial arrangements.
So you're more laissez-faire than Canada?
No, I'm not. I do not know what Canada does. I've got to see.
I'm telling you, 4% capping.
I do not know what your facts are, on what are the basis of the facts. You're just quoting something out of the context. What I'm saying, and categorically saying, that when we say reasonable, we could have just said royalty. We said reasonable royalty. And the amount of provisions there are for government to intervene. In fact, I'm being charged with having diluted our obligations.
I don't know
TRIPS
who's
compliance.
charging you with that, because in fact the charge that you face from Yusuf Hamid, I repeated it earlier, I'll repeat it again, is a charge of genocide.
Well, I think this is poetry. This is just a...
Poetry?
Absolutely.
It's an indictment.
It's not an indictment. I think the facts are totally wrong.
Okay.
Here is one singular person who has what vested interests, I do not know.
A person who is
but
head of India's biggest pharmaceutical company in domestic sales terms.
What about the others? What about the Cipla? What about the Ranbaxy?
What about A.B.
the
Bardhan?
Total?
What about A.B. Bardhan, your
They
ally? What about
voted for
Avani
us,
Roy?
Karan. They voted
But
for
they've
us.
changed their mind.
They haven't changed their mind. You are saying they've
Publicly on
changed their...
television,
What?
on the 29th of March at his party conference in Chandigarh, Mr. Bardhan said that patents will ensure that a patient will die.
Well, I think it's absolutely ill-founded.
Okay.
They spoke for it. They voted for it. They stood for it. And now to say, in retrospect, that this is something we did
They've
wrong...
thought better of it, but you haven't. That's the point.
No question.
Let me put something else to you. Your allies on the left are also saying that they want you to arm yourself with wider powers for immediate compulsory licensing without a right to oppose, as is the case in France, where a minister can issue such licenses on grounds of public health. In your case, you can only do it in a case of national emergency or extreme urgency, which is a lot narrower. They want the same French-style powers.
I'm sure you're not telling me what the bill which I got passed in Parliament
I am.
is.
I'm
If
telling
you're
you
telling
how
me-
your bill is weaker than the French equivalent.
Absolutely not. Our bill is not weak. Our bill is very tight. And there are several provisions. There are several provisions, several sections in the bill which arms government
But
to intervene in the case, in case
Of
public
national
interest.
emergency
No,
and extreme urgency,
absolutely not.
section 92 of your bill. I'm quoting it to you.
Section 64. What does section 64 say?
Section 84 actually.
But, no.
Section 84 is for reasonable affordability, but there you
That
can't
is-
do it for 3
that's
years.
the second one.
You can't do it
I'm
for
citing
3
to you
years.
the third one. I'm citing to you the third one. As I said, there are several
You're-
sections.
you're telling
you
me-
are confining yourself to only one.
You're telling me that your allies on the left who are calling for you to assume wider powers are wrong, and you will not listen to them.
I am telling you that my allies, I discussed this with them before the bill. They supported me on the floor of the House.
But now they're
And
saying something else, and you're saying you're going to
it's
ignore
hardly a
them.
month. And you're saying they're saying something else.
But
There's
they've
no
got
patent
second
being
thought.
issued.
They've got
no
sec-
patent is going to be issued for the next 2-3 years. I don't know what this is
So
all
you're
about.
saying wait till the problem arises, then I'll tackle it. You
But
won't listen to
it's
good
not
advice
even,
to prevent
it's
it.
not even on the horizon.
Okay.
And there are so many provisions.
Let's-
So I would not want to fall victim to a propaganda, which I think is totally misplaced on facts.
Interesting that you should use the word propaganda when in fact it's your allies who are talking. But let's leave patents aside. You've made clear that as far as you're concerned, your bill is fine, if not perfect. You have no intention of amending it.
Absolutely.
Let's turn to a second subject of concern. Proposals being voiced by yourself, by your finance minister, by members of the planning commission, that they're seriously considering permission for foreign investment to enter the retail trade market in India. Your critics say that this would put at risk the jobs of tens of millions of poor Indians.
It would put at risk some of the current retail.
Do you accept that?
No. Let me tell you, you must know the facts. Until you know the facts, you cannot go on. Only 2% of our retail is in the organized sector. 90% is in the unorganized sector. When I talk about retail and allowing FDI in retail, I talk of what is incremental. Today our retail sector is growing at 20%. And incremental retail, which does not displace or replace the existing retail structure we have, is what we are looking at.
You said, let's look at the facts. Let me give you the facts then. If Walmart, for instance, were to open a shop in each of the 35 Indian cities with a population of over 1 million and achieve Western standards of efficiency, it would within a year achieve a turnover of 8,000 crore, employing 935 people. At the moment, that level of turnover creates 432,000 jobs, a difference of over 430. That's an estimation of the number of jobs that could disappear.
What did I say? I said what is incremental. I said what does not displace or replace. I said we need a model, a model of FDI, which will create new jobs. And in the food sector, which creates a cold chain. Today, 40% of India's vegetables and fruits rot.
Okay,
Now, if we can have a retail which promotes a food chain and preserves the 40%, which my farmers have to lose.
But you see the problem. You see the problem. If you're talking of an ideal model, before we come to the model,
course.
let's see if we can
We have not allowed it
Well,
because I want that model.
before we come to the model, and I want to talk about the model, let's see if we agree on the sort of risk you're running.
What is the risk?
Let me put it to you.
Are you trying to say we shouldn't have it?
No, let me put to you the risk.
Are you trying to say we shouldn't have it?
I'm saying to you that the risk is one you need to consider before you go in. At the moment, for instance,
But how are you imagining I'm going in, and how and on what
because
basis
your
I'm going
finance minister has said that India is interested
Listen,
in going
this
in.
is
Your
not-
planning commission has said so.
Nobody has said so. The finance minister has not said. I have said, and I'll tell you what I've said. I've said that we are looking at a model of opening up the retail sector to FDI, which does not replace or displace my existing retailer.
Let me quote to you
which
what
looks at incremental employment.
As I said, if, and if. Let me
What is the
quote
if?
to you what the Prime Minister said to the Federation of Associations of Maharashtra in December 2002. And I'm quoting to you what
Which Prime Minister?
Dr. Manmohan Singh, and in those days he was leader of the opposition in the Rajya Sabha. He said, India does not require these kind of reforms. These kind of reforms would, rather than create employment, destroy employment.
Fair, absolutely correct.
You agree?
I'm saying
you
that.
think this is not an exaggerated fear?
Absolutely.
Fine. Let me also remind you what,
Absolutely correct.
let me remind you
That's
what,
why I haven't opened it up.
let me, but will you also, because of this
That's why I
reason,
haven't opened it up.
refuse to
Because
open it up?
I'm looking at a model. I want incrementality. I don't want to supplement my system.
Then how do you...
I want to complement my
Then how
system.
do you ensure that you achieve your target of complementing and not supplementing? How do you ensure that
Because there are several
employment is
models.
protected?
Because there are several models.
Give me an example.
If there is a 20% growth in our retail sector, I want to see that our retail sector, which comes in future, is modern, creates a cold chain for my fruits and vegetables, which trickles down to my agri sector.
But
that's what I want to look
Of course, that's what you want to ensure. But how do you overcome this danger? Today, 40 million people are employed in the retail sector in India as a whole.
I just said.
Let me finish.
I just said they
finish.
shouldn't replace or displace.
But how do you ensure that you don't? Because when 40 million are employed...
I'm just saying.
And
I am saying that we need to look at a model. I don't have that model. If I had that model, be sure I would have announced it.
So you're now admitting it. You have no model in mind.
As yet, of course.
But
I'm not saying I have no model in mind.
nonetheless, your government is talking about letting in retail sector foreign investment, and yet you have no model for controlling it.
I have not.
Shouldn't it be the other way around?
I have said so clearly, and I'm the ministry responsible for this. I have said this very clearly, that we will only have FDI in retail when we have a model which takes care of the incrementality in retail.
So it's not...
and creates jobs.
So it's not imminent at the moment.
I'm not saying we can have a model. There have been 2-3 proposals. There are models which we are examining. And if there's a model which suits me, sure, we're going to have it. If it's a model which is going to create unemployment, we're not going to have it.
And this model, will it have, in fact, laws like you do in Germany against predatory pricing?
Of course.
Will you have laws, as Malaysia was forced to consider, against location
40%
and
of
size?
Malaysia's retail is in the organized sector. So it's very different to 2% of India's. On the other hand, if when you talk to a Walmart was prosecuted in Mexico for unfair buying practices. I'm aware of all that.
And you will have
I
similar
will not
laws
have.
to take similar action if
I
necessary.
will have a law which ensures that the model which could be worked, works. Then I'll have a law. First I've got to have a model and then think of the law.
Model first, law later.
Absolutely.
So people who are scared that their jobs could be at stake can take heart from you.
Absolutely.
This is a commitment you're making.
Absolutely.
It's not just speaking.
I've said so publicly that we are not going to get into a model which replaces or displaces my existing retail sector, because 98%
Okay.
is unorganized.
Then let's-
it is subsistence retail.
Then let's leave that subject there and let's come to another subject. Indians today are looking for labor reform. To be fair, your government has often spoken of the need to ease rigidities in the labor market, but do you mean it?
Well, you know, we went into a regime. India's labor laws are designed to protect employment, not to generate employment. And we have always been protected towards the existing employment there was. Now, there are proposals from the state governments that for special economic zones, for export-oriented units, they should be able to have labor laws which they would like. We are considering...
Less rigid?
Of course, less rigid. They have asked for it. The state governments have asked for it. The question now is, should the central government stand in the way of the state governments implementing labor laws which they think are more befitting and more employment generating?
What's your answer to your own question?
What do you mean? What's
Should you stand in the way or should you not?
well, I don't think so. My special economic zone bill, which I will introduce in Parliament very shortly.
When you say very shortly, when? Because it's been pending for a long time.
I think in the next 3 weeks. I'm trying to do it.
In this session?
I'm hopeful of doing it in
And
this
in
session.
this bill, for the special economic zones, will you have more relaxed labor laws?
We have enabled it. We are not relaxing labor laws. We are enabling the states to decide which of the labor laws they'd like to relax.
And is it possible that with your enabling provisions, some states might be able to have labor
Some
laws?
states have asked for it. I just said so.
And so it's possible that in these zones you could even have amended versions of hire and fire policies.
Absolutely, it's for the state governments to decide.
So in other words, the message you're sending the state governments is, we are enabling you to choose the labor laws
Because you want to be enabled. The state governments want it.
and hereafter it's your responsibility
Well,
to decide.
in those special areas.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, you've just had a meeting with the Pakistani Commerce Minister, and both of you have agreed to set up a joint business council and to revitalize a joint economic commission. What's the significance of this?
Well, there is a reality. There's an economic reality. There's a logistic reality. We are neighbors. And a joint business council, which is supported by government, supported and promoted by government of both countries, will give ideas, suggestions to their governments on how to move.
Will this, in fact, help India achieve most favored nation status, something that Pakistan has denied India?
I don't think, even without the most favored nation status, what do the statistics show? In the recorded trade, because a large part of trade with Pakistan, which I believe is almost $1 billion, is through non-official sources. Means it goes across the border without record or goes to a third country and then it's
So you're
to
saying
Pakistan.
you don't really
let me
need
say, no,
MFN?
I'm not saying we don't need MFN. I said despite that, the figures say that our balance of trade with Pakistan is $60 million is our imports and about $280 million is our exports.
Actually, it's even worse. To be honest, the total figure is $483 million, of which 405 is India's exports and 75 is Pakistan's exports.
Well,
They are actually concerned about this imbalance.
I'm saying so. I said there is, despite there being no MFN for India, such a large imbalance of trade. And this does not take into account, the switch trade which is taking
So
place,
very
the
quickly,
unrecorded trade which is taking place. And I think
Very quickly,
it's in Pakistan's interest and in India's interest to engage in economic terms.
And is that engagement now going to be steady and progressive?
Of course it is. I think both there is a reality, there's an economic reality,
And you can
there's a
ensure
logistic
that
reality.
politics doesn't intervene.
Well, my business is trade, and I will ensure that trade does move on between India and Pakistan. I will do all I can, but it's me alone can't do it. Pakistan must also go along with it.
But is the reaction from Pakistan supportive of this?
It's very different. It's very different to what it was 6 months ago. It's very different to what it was 2 years ago. Today, the President of Pakistan in his talks was very clear that we want to have a greater economic engagement. The economic minister, trade minister wants it. Now,
So you're an optimist.
I am an optimist, certainly.
Kamal Nath, a pleasure having you on Hard Talk India.
Thank you.